I will.
Okay. Good evening to one and all who are with us today. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers, Seva Brigade Foundation, and of course, Dr. Salil Chaudhary, a very dear friend of mine. So after speaking to him this morning, we arrived at this conclusion that we should talk about the awareness about this ongoing pandemic right now, and also the fears and anxiety that is usually associated with a lot of patients regarding this pandemic. So first of all, I think most of us have already passed through the phase of the first and the second wave of this pandemic. And all of us are almost aware of how this pandemic behaves, how the virus behaves, what are the usual signs and symptoms, and also the kind of precautions that we should take on a normal level to prevent ourselves and our associates and our friends and relatives from being infected. But now looking at the new variant, that is Omicron, which has arrived, first of all, the thing is, between the first wave and the second wave, the gap was considerably long. It was about 6 months after the peak of the first wave that the second wave arrived. But in terms of the third wave, the Omicron, the interval is not 6 months, rather it is reduced to about 4 months. So technically, if we go to think about this, the virus is basically trying to stay for a longer time. And basically that is what is making it find new ways to survive. And one of the most common things that viruses do is to change their structure so that conventional treatment strategies are not effective in managing them. So that is basically called as a mutation in scientific terms, and that is what the virus does. So testing, basically the virus wants to escape from being tested. It also wants to be escaped from conventional treatment. So only then it kind of confirms its presence in the environment, and then it starts proving to be either problematic or lethal to the patient to whom it infects. So presently, the testing strategies that are being made by the government, basically by the Indian Council of Medical Research, the ICMR, they are guidelines which are issued by the government, which are focusing on only two particular things, looking at this Omicron variant. And the first thing is basically to detect this virus early in symptomatic patients by employing a 3T strategy, basically test, track, and treat. So basically we need to test the patients faster, track them so that we find out whom all they have been in contact with, and also treat them quickly so that the transmissibility of this virus is cut down. And the second thing that we are focusing on is basically on people who are more than 60 years of age with comorbidities such as diabetes, it could be hypertension, it could be a lung disease, it could be chronic kidney disease, it could be cancer, or it could also just be simple things like obesity. And to add to this, the recent thing that we are also focusing on is people who are not vaccinated. So the tests that are usually available are two kinds. Basically, one is at the point of care, which could be at home level, or it could be at a small primary healthcare center level, and that is called as the rapid antigen test, which is also called RAT in small terms. And that is basically a kit which is available in the pharmacy, and you test through that and the report comes on the spot, and the patient can interpret it very easily. The next level of testing is basically molecular tests, which are basically RT-PCR tests. And there are many other tests like gene amplification strategies like CBNAT and other things. So these are the two commonly employed strategies to test for the virus. Now the problem with these tests is that RAT, or rapid antigen test, which is commonly available like a kit, is basically not very effective. So now the question comes because when people are anxious, whenever they develop a cold, or when they have symptoms like cough, sore throat, or even runny nose or a blocked nose, they have a fear that this could probably be Omicron. whether they are vaccinated or not. And with this winter season, which is there presently, along with that, this flu virus has also been activated in the environment. So a lot of people don't know whether it is the flu that is affecting them or it is the Omicron virus which is affecting. So when they do this rapid antigen test, what happens is, if the test comes as positive, this should be considered as COVID and nothing else. Now the question comes as whether if this test comes negative, the answer is it doesn't mean that the patient doesn't have the COVID virus. It could still be that the patient is infected and the test has come negative. So that means that the RAT test is basically not a very specific test. And its efficacy is very low. So basically, in terms of numbers, if we have to look at it, this test can pick up only 60 to 70% of the patients affected with the Omicron variant. So out of 100, probably there are 30 people who are walking in the environment with a RAT test negative, and they have this feeling that they're not affected with Omicron. So then what do we do? So if at all your RAT test comes as negative, but your symptoms are very much strongly in favor of the Omicron variant, then it is better to get an RT-PCR done, which is the molecular test. And with RT-PCR, the efficacy of detecting goes up to about 90%. So that is something which is more reliable and which is more specific and which is usually asked even by the authorities. The other thing that most of us have is basically the doubt is about whom to test. So in the community, people who should get themselves tested are basically people who are symptomatic with cough, fever, sore throat, breathlessness. Also, people who have to get tested are those who are at-risk contacts. Now, by at-risk contacts, I mean basically elderly patients who are more than 60 years with comorbidities, who have, just come in contact with someone who is positive with COVID. So since they are elderly and they have comorbidities, there's a very high chance that they're easily affected by the virus. So they should get themselves tested, even if they are not infected. Just by being a contact, they should get themselves tested. The next thing is basically people who are trying to go for international travel. So it is a mandatory requirement by many of the countries to enter the country. You need to have a negative RT-PCR report. So for those countries which have this RT-PCR in their norms, those travelers need to get themselves tested. The next thing is also, it also holds for people who are coming into India from abroad. So they also need to get themselves tested with the help of a negative RT-PCR report. So what happens is basically a negative RAT is not sufficient for international travel. It is also not enough if you're trying to come to India from abroad. So this basically highlights that RAT is not a very reliable test to get yourself tested for Omicron. But yes, for screening, it is effective because in case the test comes positive, then it is COVID and nothing else. The other thing is, who are those patients who need not get tested? So that is also another commonly asked question by most of the people. And basically, if anyone is asymptomatic, then it goes without saying they need not get tested. The next thing is contacts of people who are confirmed cases of COVID, but who are less than 60 years, who don't have any comorbidities. They need not get themselves tested. Now, this is a norm which has changed from the previous guideline, where previously it was said that if you are a contact with any patient who is COVID positive, you need to get yourself tested. This was what was happening in the first wave and also in the second wave. But in the third wave, the government has relaxed in this area a little bit by saying that in case you are not having any comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, or chronic kidney disease or lung disease, you're not on any kind of steroids for any illnesses, and if your age is less than 60 years and you don't have any symptoms, whether you come in contact with a positive patient or not, it's okay to not get yourself tested. The other thing is, if at all a patient has become positive for COVID-19 and is presently under home isolation. So after getting your home isolation completed for a period of 7 days to 10 days, you need not get yourself tested again for a negative RT-PCR report, because the infectivity of this virus is very less and its ability to survive inside the body is also less. So after about 7 to 10 days of home isolation, ideally they recommend 15 days, but after 10 days of good home isolation, if your symptoms are totally reduced, you need not get yourself tested. And the other guideline is that they usually say that if at all you are going for domestic travel, just a double vaccination certificate is more than enough, and there is no requirement to get an RT-PCR done for domestic level travel. Now, this particular guideline can change with time, because in case the cases increase enormously and also the deaths associated with the illness tend to increase, then probably even for domestic and interstate travel, the guidelines may change and they may ask for a negative RT-PCR report. Also, a few of my patients whom I have treated off late, many of them have this concept of getting themselves self-medicated with azithromycin. So a lot of patients, when they present with cough, sore throat, from a period of probably 5 days to 7 days, many of the times they say that, doctor, I've already taken azithromycin. And this was advised to me by a local doctor. It could be a general physician. It could be a family doctor. It could be someone who is known to them. And they have taken azithromycin probably 250 milligrams twice a day, or it could be 500 milligrams once a day for a period of 3 days. And they were probably better after taking the medicine for a period of 1 to 2 days. And then again, the symptoms didn't get better, or the symptoms got worse. And then that is what has prompted them to come and visit the healthcare facility. And when they present to us, most of the times, this is a common thing in their history, that they have already taken azithromycin. So what should they do now? So I would like to also highlight on few misconceptions about azithromycin. Technically, it is a very easily available drug, which can be procured from a pharmacy even without prescription, because it's an over-the-counter drug. So a lot of people tend to get this from their pharmacist without a prescription. Second thing, this drug was used very commonly in the first and the second wave. So a lot of people have their beliefs that it did work in the first and second wave, so probably it's going to work again in the third wave. The third thing is, the benefit of this tablet is that it has to be taken only for 3 days. So they feel that it's a very short course, and maybe after taking this, their symptoms will disappear completely. But the real facts about this tablet is that it is not right now useful against the present flu virus which is going on in the environment. So this virus is not at all going to be treated by azithromycin. So if you have taken the tablet, or if you are taking the tablet, it is not going to be of much use. The second thing is, all antibiotics come with side effects and also resistance. So in case someone has taken azithromycin, or if they're taking azithromycin just like that, randomly for cold, cough, or flu, they should also remember that they are getting resistant to this drug over the period of time. So when there is a real necessity for this tablet, it may not work in you just because you've taken it for a long time previously without any conclusive evidence that it is going to be effective for you. So those are a few misconceptions about azithromycin which I would like to highlight, and I would like to urge everyone here that please don't try to self-medicate yourself. Don't try to share prescriptions amongst yourselves. Just because some tablet worked for you, it need not be the same with your friend or your colleague. So every illness, every symptom which is there in a patient is basically different, and it has to be evaluated by a doctor. It could be any doctor, but only then a call has to be taken as to which kind of antibiotic or drug treatment in general has to be advocated. So self-medication is basically not something which is ideal. And these are a few things which a lot of patients have been coming across. And now with respect to the Omicron virus, so the best part of this virus is that the seriousness of the illness as well as the mortality in terms of deaths is considerably very less compared to the general population in the first and the second wave. And the reason for Omicron to actually emerge in the environment, I mean, why has Omicron come? So basically, after the Delta variant, which was a very aggressive variant of the virus, which basically caused a lot of harm because a lot of mortality was observed. The patients basically in India and also in the world in general started getting themselves vaccinated at a very large rate. So then when the virus starts infecting a person who is already vaccinated, there are antibodies which are generated in our body against this particular virus. So at that time, the virus also realizes that there is something which is trying not to, help it survive in the environment. So that is when this virus has undergone a change in its structure so that it can escape this phenomenon which is being created by the scientists in terms of the vaccine, to escape the immunity which is generated by the host, or in terms of common words, the patient. But what has happened is these changes which are generated with the virus, although it is helping it to survive in the environment, it is not proving it to be very lethal to the patient, because most of us are vaccinated, most of us are rather doubly vaccinated, and the others are probably at least vaccinated once. So the trend that I'm observing right now is that most of the patients who are having COVID infection presently, they are, and that too at a very severe level, basically the ones who are hospitalized with COVID, they are either patients who were never vaccinated, or they are patients who were vaccinated, but they are probably above 60 years of age. They have some risk factors like diabetes, hypertension, chronic kidney disease. They are probably on dialysis. And they have other comorbidities, and probably because of that, they are getting hospitalized. But otherwise, the numbers in the hospital are considerably less compared to what we would have seen or expected from the second wave and our experience from the first wave. And a few people also ask whether RT-PCR is effective in this Omicron variant, because they say, there's a lot of misconception saying that, RT-PCR detects the Delta variant, but it doesn't work against the Omicron variant. So technically, what is the function of the RT-PCR is basically RT-PCR is like a CCTV camera. If there is someone who passes through it, it just says that, yes, there was someone who passed through it. It doesn't tell whether it was Delta or whether it was Omicron or whether it was any other variant. It just says that, yes, there is COVID-19. We do not know whether it is the Delta variant or the Delta plus variant or the Omicron variant or a new variant, which will probably come later after this variant. So that is the function of RT-PCR. So then the question comes, who tells whether it is Omicron or not? So to prove that whether this particular virus is Omicron or not, there are tests like genomic sequencing, where they study the genes of these viruses. And at particular levels, there are a few changes in this Omicron variant, which are technically observed. So that is something which is done at a very genetic level. But now the question comes, so if we are having the Omicron infection, should we get ourselves tested with RT-PCR or not? Yes, you have to get yourself tested, because that tells whether you are infected with COVID-19 or not. So it helps you to get isolated from others, prevents you from spreading the infection to other people, helps you to get leave from your workplace in order to get rest. The fourth thing is you also start getting treated for it. And then that is how, at the community level, the burden of this virus reduces. So for that reason, yes, we need to know whether you're infected with COVID-19 or not. It doesn't matter whether you are infected with Omicron or the Delta variant. Because if you are vaccinated, the seriousness of the illness is very, very low. The other thing that we need to know is the effectiveness of the vaccine against the Omicron variant. A lot of people ask, we have taken 2 doses, and it was basically for the Delta variant. Now it is Omicron which is running around. So is this vaccine effective against Omicron? So again, the vaccine produces antibodies in our immune system, which is effective in attacking a lot of antigens which are generated from the virus. So the COVID-19 virus, let's assume it has 100 different things to generate antibodies in our body. The Omicron variant will have a change in probably 10 or 20 of these 100 things to cause a change. But still, the vaccine is effective against the 80 other things. So the seriousness of this virus comes down to only those 10 or 20 different changes which this virus has undergone over a period of time. So that is how the lethality as well as the severity of the illness has reduced over the period of time. The other thing that people commonly ask is, what is the government doing? Are they doing anything to prevent Omicron? Because we're not seeing lockdowns, we are not seeing a lot of restrictions everywhere. So is the government really serious about this? So irrespective of which state or thing, the government is basically closely monitoring this at present. There is no decision at present of about any lockdown. We are trying to improve our diagnostics to come up with methods which can really confirm whether this is Omicron more easily compared to the genomic sequencing method, because that takes time and that is not available everywhere. So that, as well as developing new therapeutic options so that we can try and treat the Omicron variant even more quicker. And now, what about home isolation? Suppose a patient is tested positive, RT-PCR report has come, and it is there on paper that the patient is positive. So when do we decide in this Omicron variant or this Omicron pandemic right now, whether a patient should go for home isolation or should he go to the hospital? So the first thing is, if you are less than 60 years of age, you don't have any comorbidities, like I explained before, like diabetes, hypertension, or any other chronic kidney disease and other things. If your SpO2 or your blood oxygen saturation level is more than 93% in room air, then you are a candidate who is technically fit to sit at home and get yourself treated with rest and simple medicines. Now, if the patient is more than 60 years with comorbidities, if the patient is not vaccinated, if the oxygen saturation is less than 93% on room air, then yes, you are a candidate. It is better if you go to a hospital, because in case you get a little bad, then there are facilities and doctors in the hospital who can take care of you. So that is one more thing. Now, the other problem with the saturation, blood oxygen saturation, is that many people tell that, doctor, my blood oxygen saturation at room air itself is 90%. So that is less than 93% technically. So what should I do? See, because a lot of these blood oxygen saturation monitors are made in China, they're made in different countries. They're not very effective, but they give a considerable indicator about the health of the individual. So if the blood oxygen saturation is 3% below the usual baseline, say for example, the usual baseline is 90, and if now the blood oxygen saturation after getting infected is 85, then yes, this is something which needs hospitalization. If the usual saturation is 90 and it has come down to 88 or 89, it doesn't matter, you can still stay at home. Because for the simple reason, probably that saturation monitor that you're using at home has a baseline reading of only 90. So that is fine. And I think these are few commonly asked questions by most of the people. I think with that, I would like to conclude my discussion here, but if there are any queries, I think we can take them.
Sir, there was a
Yes.
yes. There was a question or a message in the chat.
Yeah.
The patient has come positive, tested positive, and they have been given doxycycline 100 mg.
100 mg, yes.
So,
yes. See, doxycycline again was given previously, and a lot of good results were seen with doxycycline. But at present, there are no universal guidelines saying that doxycycline is very effective. But yes, after taking the drug, if your patient is getting relief, then I would suggest that you can go ahead with it. But I would insist that you complete the entire course. Because another commonly done mistake by most of the Indians is that when the doctor gives the antibiotic or the prescription for a period of 5 days, people take it just for a period of 2 or 3 days. The moment they tend to feel better, they feel that, yes, now I'm completely done, so I need not take the remaining medicines. So that is a very wrong thing to do, because that again contributes to drug resistance. So in this case, suppose tomorrow, after maybe 5 years or 10 years, there is again a requirement for taking doxycycline, if you don't complete your course properly this time, then that time doxycycline won't work. So if doxycycline has been prescribed, and yes, if it is working, then there is no reason to change the antibiotic. You can completely go ahead and complete the entire course. I think that should be fine. And doxycycline is a very safe drug. The amount of side effects are almost negligible to nil. So it's a very good drug to begin with in case the patient has been tested positive.
Yes, sir. Praveen Pandey here, and
Yeah.
actually we get most of the time few questions. What is regarding the people are confused on the CT value.
Yes.
So what is the CT value, and what like if CT value is high or low? So it is a sign of any risk or what? Can you explain?
Yes. See, this is a very, very, very commonly encountered question, because most of the doctors, rather in the second wave, the doctors were relying on the CT value. But presently in the third wave, what I've seen is, since I'm working in a public setup, the CT value is of no use. Please don't go by the CT values. See, because the CT values are basically for the radiologist when they report on the computerized tomography, the CT scan of the chest. Many times the CT value shows something, but the patient is clinically fine. He has absolutely no symptoms. The chest just shows that, the chest is bad. Those patients, they tend to come out better just with home isolation and, treatment at home. Please don't rely on the CT value, because many times they say it is 22, it is 25, it is 18, it is 16, what to do? Just don't follow it, because right now in the third wave, we have stopped following the CT value. It was followed in the second wave. In the first wave, there was a lot of research about it, and people had actually come up about it in the first wave, towards the end of the first wave. So it was like a trending thing in the second wave. But in the third wave, we are absolutely not concerned about it. Rather, in the third wave, we even don't go to get a CT scan done. We just get a simple chest X-ray done. If the patient is really symptomatic, then yes, CT scan. The percentage of getting CT scans of the chest for the Omicron variant right now, I would say, is probably less than 10% of our clinical practice at present. So don't go by the CT value.
Yeah, one more question. Actually, most of the people like they want to know on what is the difference exactly on the treatment on the second wave to this wave, because people have mindset they have gone through the second wave very well, and they understood what we have done in the second wave. So some people are starting the same medication what they have followed on the second wave. So how to guide them, and how to tell them, no, you need to take the doctor advice, then only you can go through the any medication or any kind of medical.
Okay. See, I'll tell you. Basically, if we understand the evolution of the virus, basically in the first wave, there was a lot of discussion about hydroxychloroquine. Now, I think this was also in the news because India had exported a lot of tablets to the United States. And that time it was said that, hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, they are wonder drugs against COVID-19. So take this and you will be done. And what I had observed is the place where I used to practice, the pharmacies actually ran out of stocks for azithromycin and hydroxychloroquine. It was almost getting sold in black. This happened in the first wave. But then towards the middle of the first wave, the research started showing evidence that the drug is actually of not much use. So then hydroxychloroquine became a not so, fantasized drug, and even azithromycin was not, in vogue. Then what happened is in the second wave, people started prescribing drugs like how one of the patients pointed out about doxycycline. There were also drugs about amoxicillin with clavulanic acid. There were drugs like ciprofloxacin, levofloxacin. These were the commonly prescribed antibiotics for patients with home isolation. Of course, with things like multivitamins, zinc, vitamin C, these were again usually prescribed. Now, the thing is, since this is a viral infection, what we are prescribing is basically antibiotics. Now, the common thing here is that antibiotics are basically prescribed for bacterial infections, not for viruses. For viruses, basically, you're supposed to get antivirals. So now the question is, why antibiotics are given when a patient is suffering from a viral infection? The answer is that a virus, be it any virus, be it the flu virus or the COVID virus, it basically reduces our immunity. It basically reduces our capacity to fight against infections. And what happens when our capacity to fight against infection goes down is that we get prone to get infected by bacteria, which usually won't infect us. But because our immunity has gone down, bacteria starts getting an upper hand. For that, antibiotics are given, so that once 3 to 5 days or even 1 week of this viral infection is over, body starts producing antibodies against this virus. So basically, by giving antibiotics, we are not treating the virus. We are treating super added or extra bacterial infections which can happen. So for the virus, it is our body only which is trying to fight. And for that, we are giving our body time. It could be about 5 to 7 days. The same thing happened in the second wave. Now in the third wave, what has happened is, the third wave has happened at a time which is usually the winter season in India. So many of the states, because of the low temperature, the flu virus has also got activated there. So the flu along with this COVID has created a confusion. So many of the times, the antibiotics now that are given, they are basically to treat the bacterial infections which could have happened if there was a flu virus. And that is helping them get down of the symptoms of the flu as well as the Omicron variant. So the antibiotics have changed now. Like I said, azithromycin is totally not effective. The other thing is, prescribing medicines in the third wave is purely a customized thing. It depends on the patient's symptoms. Some of the patients, they have only throat pain and cough. They don't have nose block, they don't have breathlessness, they don't have runny nose, nothing. So in them, the choice of medicines change. If the patient is having nose block or runny nose along with throat pain, then again the antibiotics change. So in the third wave, we are trying to customize and give antibiotics only if it is really required, and that too depending upon the symptoms. There is no generalized fixed drug that we are prescribing. And most of us have also stopped prescribing zinc to most of our patients, because what we have observed is that after prescribing patients multivitamins containing zinc, in the second wave, a lot of patients came back with black fungus or mucormycosis. And mucormycosis is basically a fungal infection of the nose, and zinc is basically a food for the fungi. So if you have excessive zinc in your body, fungi thrives inside your body. So we don't want that environment to be falsely created in your body in this third wave. So we have started to avoid prescribing excessive amounts of zinc to patients. So that is basically a change in the treatment strategy compared to the second wave that we are doing in the third wave.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh. One question which I want you to touch upon is, there is a confusion in many minds. Many people have started using this home-based self-kits for detection of virus. So are these kits really useful? And what can you explain everyone what is false negative and false positive which is happening with these home kits? And are they really indicative of someone getting affected by COVID?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I actually touched upon it, a little in the beginning. What I would say is that the rapid antigen test kits, they're only 60 to 70% effective. So in simple terms, what I would like to say is, if 100 people get themselves tested with a kit, there's a possibility that there could be 30 or 40 patients who are having COVID infection, but their kit comes as negative. And they are probably roaming around freely in the environment, and they are infecting others. But on the other hand, if you get an RT-PCR done, then the effectiveness of picking up the COVID virus is about 90%. So it is better to get an RT-PCR done for the safety of oneself, along with the safety of his or her family members, and also the close contacts. And the other thing that we should understand is that, like how I highlighted earlier, that if you are, the countries where we are trying to travel, international travel, they are accepting only RT-PCR and not the kit. So if that is the case, then we should understand that, it goes by common sense that it is RT-PCR which is actually making more sense compared to the kits. So I would say that, it is better to go for a kit, to go for the RT-PCR instead of the kit. Because there's always, you gain the chance of picking up the virus by about at least 20 to 30%. So it makes more sense to go with the RT-PCR.
Doctor, one more question which people are asking, like how long if I've taken the second dose and first dose and second dose, what is the duration which we need to have for the booster dose? How long after that second dose we can
It
have?
is 9 months. It is 9 months or 36 weeks after the second dose that a person becomes eligible to take the third dose or the precautionary dose, as they are calling it right now.
Sir, as you told about false negative, false positive, is the false
Yes.
negative also possible? Like here it's coming here it's
No,
coming
no,
positive,
the false
but
negative is very rare. False negative is almost nil.
yeah.
So
Okay.
the thing is, if you get a kit done, if the kit says that a patient is positive, he is positive. No need to get an RT-PCR done if the kit says it is positive. Questions come only when the kit is negative. When the kit comes as negative, there's a still 30% chance that he is positive. So that time we advise the patient to get an RT-PCR done. So at home level, suppose a patient is having almost all symptoms of COVID. Everybody knows that yes, everything is fitting into the criteria. Get a kit done at your home itself. It comes as positive, end of the story, you are positive. But if the kit comes as negative and the symptoms are increasing, there is no resolution of those symptoms, you're having a very high suspicion. Get an RT-PCR done. There's a high chance that you will come positive in the RT-PCR. So that time you cannot blame the kit saying that our kit came as negative. How can this RT-PCR come positive? It is some money-making strategy of these laboratories, or the government is doing some kind of strategy. No, it is basically that the RT-PCR is a more sensitive test, and the chance of picking up the virus in the RT-PCR is almost 90% compared to the kit, which was probably only 60 to 70%. Now the question comes: if you have to get one test done, what to get? Should you get a kit done or an RT-PCR done? The answer is RT-PCR. The problem with an RT-PCR is that RT-PCR doesn't come quickly. You give the sample today, the lab gives the results almost tomorrow or maybe by today evening if you give the test in the morning. Kit, the only thing is you get the answer quickly. It's a matter of 2 minutes, you will get your results. So that is where a kit is better compared to an RT-PCR. But in terms of picking up or conclusively underlining a patient, I would say RT-PCR.
Yeah, but in last time we have seen that once the people are having the SRFID, then they're getting admitted to the hospital. So I think RT-PCR is a compulsory once you are trying to get to into the hospital like that.
Yes, because the hospitals are running short of beds. The hospitals are running short of oxygen. The hospitals are running short of doctors. So when that is the case, we don't want people who are negative with flu to come and get admitted in the hospital, because they are increasing the burden on the healthcare system. So that is the reason hospitals are insisting on an RT-PCR to get the patient admitted inside. Because we know that if the RT-PCR is positive, 90 to 95% of the times the patient is a COVID patient.
Sir, I have a few more questions. Like one of them is suppose like people who are living with patients, like taking care of them, like family members or friends are affected. Okay. As I know, like I live with family members who are affected. There are a few friends of mine in here who live in hostel where hostelers are affected. So what kind of specific precautions we can take which keeps us safe?
Okay. See, now this is a very good question, and basically even the government has made a few guidelines for this. If you are living in a house where you are treating a patient who is positive, who is under home,
specifically some medication or something that we can take to keep ourselves more safe. Those guidelines that we wash hands and use sanitizer and keep distance, that is there.
Yes.
But
yes.
This part, please tell us.
Yes. Verify using sanitizer, maintaining social distance. Now, the question is, there is no drug which you can take as prophylaxis. Basically, what you're hinting towards is prophylaxis. Some tablet which I'll start today itself, so that if tomorrow I'm getting COVID also, it gets nullified. There is nothing like that. Please don't go by that myth. This was the myth in the first wave with hydroxychloroquine. Doctors had taken hydroxychloroquine thinking that since we are treating patients with COVID, tomorrow after 1 week or 10 days I might get COVID, so I'll stop that by taking hydroxychloroquine right now. No, please don't go to self-medicate yourself with any drug thinking that it is going to prevent COVID from coming. That is not going to happen. What you can do is basically you can start doing things which probably improve your immunity. What you can do is basically you can, don't stop exercising, don't stop doing yoga, don't stop your fitness things, don't go to, eat a lot of junk food. These are things which are probably more helpful, but don't just go to randomly take any tablet thinking that, that is the answer. Now, in terms of treating somebody, like how you said, if your person is staying in the hostel or he's staying in a house and there is someone who is infected and you're, the caregiver to that particular patient. See, if there is a separate room for that patient to get isolated from the rest of the family members, then you just have to isolate that patient separately. One particular caregiver goes with a mask and a sanitizer, keeps the food outside, like how everything was followed in the first wave. Simple things. Now, the question comes, basically, I get a lot of questions from people who are, in metro cities where the houses are very small, the number of people are more, there is overcrowding, or in hostels where there is induced overcrowding, basically, where in a room there are 2 people or 3 people, sharing the same space. That is where the government says that if you do not have facilities to isolate yourself or the patient, then please get yourself hospitalized. It is an indication to get hospitalized because the hospital will accept you because you don't have facilities to isolate. So the house is a very small house where there is no facility to keep that patient separate. Please get yourself isolated. There are, if at all not hospitals, there are separate isolation centers in few of the metros where they have separate rooms just for this. So that is a better option so that the rest of the family is not at risk.
We will take questions from the chat box.
Yeah.
So one of the patient is saying that if SpO2 level keep varying from 95 to 99%, is there any exercise or something to keep it maintained?
See, if it is above 93%, nothing to do. It's a good sign.
Okay.
If the SpO2 is varying between 90 to 95, now let's create a scenario like it is between 90 to 95 because 90 is less than 93. So it's technically something to be worried about. Then what doctors advocate is something called as a 6-minute walk test. So what they say is basically you need to walk for 6 minutes in your house or in that isolated facility where the patient is. And then after that, check for the SpO2 levels. If after walking for 6 minutes, if the SpO2 drops, say for example, from 95, it becomes 90 or it becomes 88. If it is reducing by 3%, then this patient is probably someone who would require oxygen.
Okay.
And in that case, better to get hospitalized. But after walking for 6 minutes, if it is coming from 99 to 95, no need to worry because it is still above 93. So as long as it's above 93, don't panic.
Okay. Another question is, in this third wave, double mask is enough or do we need to use any specific mask?
Double masking is very good. At least single mask because most of the people don't even wear one mask. So I would say wearing an N95 with a cloth mask, in front or a disposable, 3-ply mask, a simple surgical mask is more than enough. But cloth mask, people are saying that, the effectiveness is not so great because we don't know what kind of cloth is being used. Because the quality of cloth is a very different thing. Something might be, pure cotton, something might be mixed with something. So we cannot comment on it. So an N95 with a simple 3-ply mask is more than enough if you put it properly and you're covering your nose and mouth and not just your mouth. So yes, that is enough.
Okay. One more question is there that asymptomatic person can be a transmitter or not. So should they go through this quarantine period or what?
No, that is the new guideline. Basically, that's what I highlighted. If you're asymptomatic, even if you've come in contact with a patient who is COVID positive, but your age is less than 60 years and you don't have any risk factors, don't get yourself tested. Don't get yourself tested. There is no guideline for isolation.
Yeah, the question was like, if we are asymptomatic, can we transmit COVID? And if we can, because I have read somewhere that even if we are asymptomatic, yes, we can be a carrier for it.
Yes.
So this is the clarification which we need, whether we are going to be
asymptomatic person can transmit the virus, probably if he is within 5 days of being exposed to a patient who is positive.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, we have question from Dhananjay. Dhananjay, you can ask directly.
Yes, Dhananjay sir, please unmute and ask.
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much. Wonderful session, sir. Great. We have enjoyed. In the apartment, it is not the story of my apartment. Most of the apartments have a lot of members who are tested positive. So having the same maid, because in the apartment, the same maid goes to other houses, or security staff is same, or when food has to be delivered to the members in that flat. So delivery boy who goes to who passes through the same corridor, or who will be passing through other doors and all. So what is the risk, sir? How big is this risk?
See, the risk is considerably there. I wouldn't say it is not there, because like how someone asked, the previous question, where if the maid is an asymptomatic person, can she be a carrier? She can be a carrier. And if she is a carrier, then yes, she can possibly even infect people. But now the question is, if that maid is doubly vaccinated, then the risks are less, because even if the maid gets infected, she is going to have a very strong immune response. Her infectivity naturally starts coming down. Okay, so that is one place where you can ensure that people who are coming to your house, who are basically commoners, who go to a lot of common areas, like the lift man, delivery boy, maid, these people, please ensure that they are doubly vaccinated. Because we need to be prepared for the worst. So in case they are doubly vaccinated, say for example, even if they get infected, their health is not at risk. And if all the family members in your house are doubly vaccinated, naturally even your risk is less. But there is no denying that risk is there. There is nothing like there is no risk. Risk is definitely there. The only thing is you can work towards reducing that risk, to as minimum as possible.
Understood. A similar question, if I'm allowed, if Satya sir allows me to ask another question.
Sure, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Sir, another question is, because we have seen in the first time and the second time, when it was happening, we were stopping the entry of maid and all, or outsiders and all in the house. This time we are not doing that.
Right.
But still we are restricting the maids to go to those houses which are COVID positive, or the members or the flat members who has been positive. So what do you suggest? As you are telling me, 2 vaccines are done. I know the maid is vaccinated twice and most of us are vaccinated. Do you still allow on humanity ground to avail the service of maid, because they also need extra care, extra food, all those things? That should be allowed?
See, if the maid is doubly vaccinated, and if she has worked in a house where there is someone who's positive, and if that person is not in isolation in that house, see, in spite of being positive, that person is roaming around freely in his house, and that maid is working in that house, then that maid is at a very high risk. Technically, that maid should not be allowed to work in any other house, irrespective of her vaccination status, because she is directly exposed. Now, if that person who is positive is isolated, he's in a separate room, the maid is not entering that room at all. She is only treating, the rest of the house. It could be the hall, the kitchen, the other areas. So she's basically coming in contact with people who are not directly involved in contact with that particular positive patient. So that maid can probably work in multiple houses because the risk is less. But like I said, the risk is definitely there. It's only about trying to make it as minimum as possible.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
There is a small question. Indeed, it was a wonderful session by you, and it was very clear for us. So, what is the risk for the kid who are not vaccinated? So let's say.
Yeah, see, this is a very good question, because we've not touched upon pediatric patients as such. What we are seeing is that kids are getting positive nowadays. Although the positivity is very less in kids, because naturally their immune system is much, much better than adults for this virus. So it is a fact that even if children turn out to be positive, with just 4 or 5 days of simple isolation and medications, they tend to come out very well. But the only thing is that the vaccines have not yet been rolled out for the kids, because now the government has just introduced, between the 15 to 18-year-old group. So it will take time for the government to come down to, the pediatric population. So till then, yes, it is better to keep the kids, away from, meeting at common places. And I think that's why most of the even schools have resorted back into, I think, online classes. So I would say, yes, it is better to keep the kids still, at home.
So, sir, do we think anything anticipated for the third wave, when it will reach the peak and how long it will go?
Yes. See, looking at the present statistics, since because I'm presently working in Pune in a government setup, we are expecting the peak somewhere between the end of this month and the middle of next month. So it could probably be somewhere between 30th Jan to 15th Feb that we could expect the peak. And by the end of Feb or, the first week of March, we are expecting the wave to start going down. So the duration of this third wave is going to be less compared to the second wave, but the numbers are going to increase exponentially.
Okay, sir. One more question. As a general, those people who want to, all are is the immunity power only here. So is there any way we can have something our immunity strong so that if virus is coming to us also we are not getting affected by it?
The thing is, question of immunity only started coming once COVID came into existence. Till then, nobody was talking about immunity as such. Okay, so now, immunity is a very innate thing. It is present in the body from the moment we are born. The problem is that we need to see that we are not having comorbidities. It is these comorbidities which actually start reducing our immunity. So the first thing is, if you are diabetic and if you are uncontrolled, start getting your sugars under control. If you're having chronic kidney disease, start staying away from gatherings. Stop going to places where, people come in, large numbers. If you're having chronic lung disease, stop smoking, stop alcoholism. These are things which are going to reduce your immunity. And these are things which are going to probably, invite the virus. So these extra habits which we have, inculcated out of interest, these are things which have to, come down to, increase our immunity. And apart from that, it is just the normal food that all of us eat. There is nothing else to, just boost your immunity. You can go into, a lot of course, yes, it has also been said in a lot of studies that vegetarian diet is more beneficial. So I think that is it about immunity. There is nothing more special or specific about it.
Well, sir, two more questions from my side. One is, what is the use of Geneoran, sir? Am I pronouncing it right?
No, I didn't get it. What is it?
Sir, Geneoran. This is a medicine given to one of the patients. And the patient is saying, when I take it at night after food and I wake up, my blood pressure level drops because of it. So she has stopped taking it.
What is the spelling of this particular drug? I mean, I'm not able to get it.
Okay, I will get back to you with it, sir. And what is the effectivity of Coronil in this, sir?
Coronil, no. I wouldn't say. Okay. Coronil is, I think, that Patanjali product, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not wrong. No. Not of much significance. It is just like taking Chyawanprash. I mean, you can take Chyawanprash just, with the hope that it increases your immunity. There is nothing, all these, Ayurvedic products, no doubt they are really good. Nothing is specific against COVID. They are effective against, normal viruses in general. There is nothing which is specifically engineered against COVID or Omicron. So I wouldn't say that, start taking it just like that. You were not taking it before, you need not take it now. If your immunity is good, fair enough.
Okay.
Sir, one question. Virendra with this side.
Yeah.
Any other suggestion for diabetic and BP people in this situation right now?
Yes. See, the thing is, if you're diabetic or if you're hypertensive or if you're having both, the only thing is, most of the times these are lifestyle disorders, right? So what you can do is, you cannot escape from it, but I would just suggest that try to keep it under control. If your sugars are high, if your 3-month average, HbA1c is, more than 5.5, try to get it down below 5.5. If your, blood pressures are high, try to get it under control within 140 systolic. I think these are enough to, battle against COVID because they reduce your susceptibility towards the virus. Because even if you're having this disease, you're trying to keep it under control. You're making an active effort against it. So I think that should be good enough. But if your sugars are uncontrolled and if your blood pressure is high, then you are a person who is at risk, because if you catch the infection, and because of that, if something goes wrong, if your sugars increase or if your blood pressures increase, it becomes difficult to get it under control at that time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Sir, in the second wave, we used to take Kada at home and then vapor. So how is this effective? Kada, if you homemade Kada, if you are preparing at home, and
take it now also. But then yes, against Kada, I think there was recently a publication which was made by the ENT surgeons itself from Maharashtra, and what was seen was people started taking Kada left, right, and center in the morning, afternoon, and night, and that started causing gastritis because there's having a lot of ginger and pepper in it. So yes, Kada is good if it is taken in a limited amount, maybe, once in a day, it is fine. Again, it is not specific to COVID, but it is just for your overall immunity. So there's no harm in taking it, but just don't overdo it.
And what about the vapor? We used to take the vapor.
That is also fine. Steam is also good enough. There was a lot of misconception against steam inhalation, looking into the black fungus aspect. But I would say, yes, steam inhalation is helpful. It can be done at least 3 times in a day for 10 minutes each time.
So I think we have covered all the questions here. If anybody else has any question, please come ahead fast, because we have to wind up as well. So I will request Praveen Kumar Pandey sir to wind up the session. Praveen sir, please.
I would like to thanks Rajesh sir a lot for spending that much time and educating everyone on lots of misconception, and session was very much interactive, and then very clearly you stated all the information which it was easy for us to understand. And I would like to thanks Dr. Salil Chaudhary also for organizing this session, and special thanks to the sir, because people are very much busy, and getting the time even half an hour, 1 hour is very difficult, which we can understand. And I would like to thanks that you came forward for educating the people, and making so many confusion is there with everyone. Now the people are in very fear stage, and because of COVID, people will not have much tension, but because of fear, they will get more and more tensions. So it's a very an anxiety stage now, and I don't know when and what will happen. So I would like to thanks you for from on behalf of all our organization, Seva Brigade Foundation, and all its member. And yeah, so I would like to add Anubhav also, if you want to add something. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for your time. And it was quite interactive session. Your information was quite valuable, and you have cleared a lot of misconceptions which was going around. And like Praveen said, yes, it was like the people are more afraid than they should actually, because this has created, we have seen the second wave. It was not quite, we can say a lot of people has lost their loved ones. So they are more afraid in Omicron, but yeah, thanks a lot for clearing all those doubts. And I know it's great to have an hour of your time, and we are sorry to take an hour, but yeah.
No, it's fine. It's completely fine.
I'd like to invite Salil Chaudhary also to have some words, final words. Yeah, Salil.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh, for taking out time from your busy schedule and giving information. Dr. Rajesh, being an ENT surgeon, he is always interacting with as a frontline guy for these COVID cases. So his first-hand experience, I think, will be really helpful for most of us here. Thanks a lot for your time, and we hope that you stay safe and make sure that everyone who is coming to you, they are safe. Thank you, Dr. Rajesh.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.